Hello and welcome to another edition of the Alnwick Castle podcast. I'm Daniel Watkins.
And I'm Deborah Beecroft.
And today on the podcast we're joined by Sarah Roller, Policy and Education Manager for Historic Houses, a cooperative of independent historic houses across the UK, including mansions, manor houses and of course castles like Alnwick. Historic houses aim to create support networks and methods for historic places to work together and help preserve heritage for the future.
You can join Historic Houses as a member, which gives you free entry to hundreds of houses, castles and gardens across the country, including Alnwick.
So we spoke to Sarah to find out more about them, what they do, and her own role in supporting places like Alnwick Castle. Please enjoy. We are very happy to welcome Sarah Roller to the Alnwick Castle podcast. Hi Sarah, how are you?
Hi Daniel, I'm good. How are you?
All right, thank you. Very pleased to have someone from Historic Houses join us on the podcast. But let's start by asking a little bit about you. So what's your background and what's your role at Historic Houses?
So my background is in history. I have loved history for a very long time and I feel very lucky to have studied it and ended up working in a kind of history adjacent field, I guess. And what I'm really interested beyond just pure history is about how we use history and how people interact with history, the general public interact with history on a daily basis. So I have worked in a historic house doing absolutely everything from front of house to running a tea room to researching archives and collections. I've also worked for a different history podcast, which was really interesting. I'm interested again in how audiences consume history and what kind of history they want to listen to and to watch on TV. And then I joined Historic Houses about 2.5 years ago. I cover our policy, public affairs and education work at Historic Houses.
Would that be a particularly chart-topping other history podcast by any chance?
It would, Daniel. It was Dan Snow's history hit. So I joined actually at a really fun, interesting time. So they had Dan's main podcast, which is the really famous one. But it was just at the time that they were beginning to roll out other more specialised podcasts. So I was there when they launched not just the Tudors, when they launched Gone Medieval, which are two of the popular ones. And I also, which was really fun, did some focus group work around some of the new podcasts that they've subsequently launched after I left. So it was really fun to sit around and say, well, what do I want in a podcast and how would we make that appealing to everyone else? You know, am I a good representative of my generation and like a female demographic, for example? What do women want from a history podcast as opposed to men? So yeah, it was a really, really fun, interesting place to work.
And did you get to appear on any of these or was this your debut?
No, I wasn't on any of the podcasts. I was actually chatting to a friend who also used to work at History Hit last night. And my work there actually was mostly on marketing and on the website that they have. And one of the things I used to do was write lots of articles about all kinds of aspects of history. And I still get emails and Twitter messages from people who have read my past articles and want me to go on a radio show or a podcast or give a talk to their local WI. So the one I've only ever done that I kind of acquiesced to was actually a kind of Historic Houses story, because it was an article I wrote about the Duchess of Argyll and the very British scandal TV show that came out a few Christmases ago. So I went on the radio to talk about the Duchess of Argyll for that, which was quite fun.
And for those who may not know about Historic Houses, can you just explain a little bit about what Historic Houses is?
Yeah, of course. So Historic Houses is the not-for-profit membership association, which represents about 1,450 grade 1 and grade 2 star listed independent historic houses across the UK, which is a really big mouthful to say. Basically, we are a big heritage organisation. We are an umbrella for people like Alnwick Castle and for other big historic houses in the UK who are still in private or charity ownership. So we're not the National Trust and we're not English Heritage, is probably the best way to say it. Most of our members are the big historic houses that aren't them. I thought it might be useful to give a little bit of history about kind of where historic houses came from and why we were formed. So we turned 50 last year. We were founded in November 1973. So we did have a birthday cake in the office for our organisation, which was quite fun. But basically, as some of you guys will already know, but after the Second World War, historic houses were in a really bad state in the UK. Lots of them got requisitioned during the war. They were used by the army, by schools, as hospitals. and they suffered quite a lot of damage in that time, understandably. When their owners got them back, not only did they have a sort of house which needed loads and loads of money spent on it, but they also had really high death duties. They've been increased throughout the 1940s. And so a lot of owners decided that the best way to deal with this big financial drain was basically to start tearing down their beautiful houses, which was really sad. And so lots of people in the 40s, 50s and 60s tear down their houses. But the other side of the coin is that in the late 1940s, early 1950s, people begin to open up their stately homes to the paying public and really embrace the commercial dimension of that. And so by the time Historic Houses was founded in 1973, there were hundreds of houses which opened their doors in a very commercial manner to the public. Lots of owners with lots of initiative had realised that there was a really big market, that paying public wanted to come and look around their homes. And they were also, I think, spooked by the fact that a Labour government in waiting, a Labour opposition, had started talking about a wealth tax. And that wealth tax would have really big implications for historic house owners. And it would basically mean that they wouldn't be able to open their doors anymore to the public and that they'd have to sell off the houses they owned. So Historic Houses comes into being at this moment in time. And I think the reason that story is important is because we were founded as a lobbying organisation, first and foremost. And that's still the work I do today. We lobby on very different things. We don't lobby really on wealth taxes anymore. Surprise, surprise. But what we do lobby on is basically saying, well, historic houses do amazing work in their communities, in interesting the general public in history, in Britain's soft power and bringing tourists to this country. And one of the things that we want to ensure is that historic houses have a supportive framework to operate in. So we did a lot of work in the pandemic, for example, encouraging the government to let people open their gardens to the paying public again, because people needed beautiful spaces to go and spend time in, but it was also good to kind of keep that side of a business going. We lobby a lot around things like planning rules so that it's easier for people to convert outbuildings or parts of their sort of stables or things into cafes and spaces for people to come and enjoy. So it's a very different kettle of fish to what we were founded for 50 years ago, but the same threads run through it all, if that makes sense.
Yeah, some of those threads apply to Alnwick Castle as well. It was used as a school during the Second World War. It opened up to the public properly in 1950. After the war, it was in quite a bad state economically. The rooms needed refreshing and restoring. The electricity needed upgrading. All these sorts of things apply here as well. But before we ask the next thing, we do have to follow up about your 50th birthday cake. What was Historic House's 50th birthday cake? Was it shaped like a castle?
It was. So it took a lot of designing, I tell you. My colleague who got to do that, I'm not sure whether I'm envious or very glad I didn't have to do that. Lots of pressure. It was a chocolate and vanilla cake that looked like a historic house. Yeah, it was beautiful. It's really good. I think we still have some of it in our office freezer. So it gets wheeled out on special occasions.
So if people aren't familiar with historic houses as a group, they've probably seen or been to some of the best known places that are associated with it. So Alnwick Castle is one, hopefully. But what are some of the other best known places that fall under your membership?
So I always say the three most famous ones, other than Alnwick, obviously, would be Blenheim Palace in Oxfordshire, Chatsworth House in Derbyshire, and Castle Howard in Yorkshire. And the main reason they're so famous is because most of them have been used as really iconic locations in film and TV work, to be honest. So Castle Howard was in the 1981 Brideshead Revisited, and Chatsworth was Pemberley in a lot of Jane Austen adaptations. So most people know them for that, and they get a lot of tourists. And Blenheim's been in everything. Blenheim's amazing as well. But they're the kind of three really big ones that people always kind of, their eyes light up when you talk about them.
Yeah. What about some of the smaller ones, the sort of hidden gems that people may not have heard about, but are definitely worth a look?
So I always hate it. It was one of the worst questions, I think, is when people ask me which one my favourite is because I genuinely don't have a favourite, and B, I'm quite aware that I'm quite easily influenced by things like it being a sunny day or, like someone giving me a really nice slice of cake in the tea room. But some of my favourites that are a bit off the beaten track. So two of them I wanted to mention because they've got amazing dramatic landscapes and settings. So one of them is a place called Dunnottar, which is on the Aberdeenshire coast, and it's a ruin, but it's literally perched on the edge of the North Sea. It's incredibly dramatic. When you go around, you have this sort of real sense of ancient history and what it would have been like when people were trying to invade and castles were a defensive fortress. And then the other side of the UK is this lovely, also a castle, but a Victorian romantic castle called Muncaster, which is right on the edge of the Western Lake District. And so you get all the fells and they kind of like roll down into the sea with Muncaster at the bottom. It's lovely. Athelhampton House in Dorset has my favourite garden possibly in the whole world. I think it's like walking into a fairy tale when you look around. And it's also a really beautiful house. And then my other, again, quite a famous one of my other favourite ones is Houghton Hall in Norfolk, which is like this beautiful, elegant Palladian mansion. But the reason I love it is because they always put contemporary art exhibitions and installations throughout the house and grounds. So last year we were there and I caught the end of this Sean Scully exhibition. He's a Irish-American sculptor and he had loads of work around it. They've got an Anthony Gormley and Magdalena Dondo exhibition this year. And I think it's just a really good conversation starter having contemporary art in old settings, because people always have an opinion about it and they always want to make a comment. And it's really fun, not only like doing that yourself, but also listening to what other people think of those things in those spaces. It's fascinating.
We would like to list all 1,450 places, but we probably can't do that right now because it would take a very long time. But just in those examples, you've kind of covered from the southwest of England up to the north of Scotland. So it really is places all over the UK.
Yeah, and that's one of the interesting things about the lobbying work I get to do as well, is we operate in all 4 nations of the UK. So it's very different, as you can imagine. The like country house context in Northern Ireland is super different to the context even in Scotland or England or Wales. So it always keeps us on our toes as to what's going on politically, but also how country houses exist in those like heritage spheres in their own nation.
It sounds like you do get to visit a lot of these places as well.
Yeah, it's the best part of my job, obviously. Who doesn't love a nice day out? But yeah, no, it's been great. It's also really interesting because I think often in the UK, we're not that great at exploring parts of the UK. So one of the joys of my job so far has been getting to visit all these weird and wonderful places that I would never otherwise have a reason to go to. So yeah, it's been great for my geography as well.
And you did get to come up to Alnwick with historic houses, had a good look round, but Northumberland is a very good area for these sorts of places.
Yeah, it was brilliant. Daniel, you gave me a brilliant tour of Alnwick. It was also quite interesting. I was at a conference at the end of last week and we were talking about the phrase country house. And I always think at Alnwick, you've kind of got it lucky being a castle because you don't have all the baggage of a country house. You're a castle and castles are cool. You know, people come to castles and they want to learn history and that's so fun. And you guys do an amazing job of telling people really interesting history. And the whole of Northumberland, I mean, is littered with beautiful castles and sort of sweeping coastline. Yeah.
So what are some of your favourite parts of what you get to do? Is it the visiting and going around, or is it chances to get lots of other historic houses together in one place and find out what everybody's got going on?
It's a mixture. So obviously it's very fun to get to go and visit lots of lovely houses. That's nice. I also think that part of the fun part of this job is the people, is you meet incredibly interesting people when you go and visit these places, both sometimes the people who own them, but also the people who work in them. You get to meet a real range, and I love that. The people side of my job is one of my favourite bits. I really like getting to bring people together. I feel very strongly that historic houses, we have lots of sort of functions as an organisation, but I think we're a really valuable network. If you work in a historic house, then I'm sure Daniel and Deborah you'll be able to attest to that better than I will. But it's quite a weird set of challenges. It can be a strange workplace. You never know what's going to come next. There's all kinds of weird and wonderful things that happen. But trying to make sure that people feel like they have people to talk to or people in similar roles to them and connect them up and add that mutual support is really nice. And it's really inspiring hearing all the different projects people are doing to bring history to life, to welcome in the community, to kind of help people enjoy these fantastic spaces on their doorstep. I think one of the other things I love is the fact that I get to basically champion to government, to civil servants, to the rest of the heritage sector, why history and heritage and country houses are important. And I really believe that they are. So I think I have a very easy job in that respect. You know, it doesn't take much for me to get enthusiastic about talking about historic houses. But what a joy. And when we get policy wins, when things we've said get read out in Parliament, when we get to hear things quoted, when ministers come and visit historic houses place and have a really great time, that's incredibly rewarding to be like, wow, other people are getting it too. You know, if we can make this mission to government and remind them of all the brilliant work that goes on in these places and the history that they're keeping alive and looking after, then that's kind of a marker of success for me and my job, and that's really exciting.
Do you want to briefly lobby to the converted, as in us, on why historic houses are important?
Yeah, I mean, so for me, I think I've always loved stories and history, but historic houses bring history to life in a way that nothing else can do. You know, going and walking in the footsteps of people in the past, it sort of puts a shiver up your spine, I think, and it's really brilliant. And so giving those spaces for people to do the same. I think the other thing that's unique about historic houses in particular are that they can tell so many different stories in every sense of the word. So I always say that I think they tell three stories really, or three themes. One is the hyperlocal. So, you know, why is this particular building here? Why this location? Why this area? What's the local story? The next one is the national story. So how did the wider national politics or social milieu end up having these things built? At Alnwick, for example, the Duke of Northumberland, you know, who was the Duke of Northumberland? How did he fit into the tapestry? Why was Alnwick important in England's national story? What were the broader themes? And then you also get this global context as well, which people are beginning to explore more and more, and particularly probably not for the Northeast, where there's a lot of castles and kind of Viking invaders and Wars of the Roses and that very sort of dramatic English history, I guess. But certainly houses that were built a few centuries later, they were part of this outward-looking global economy that Britain participated in. And where does that fit? You know, lots of people were off trading, were merchants, were exploring, were politicians in a very global economy by this point. And how do those houses and their collections fit into those stories as well? So I think they're really fascinating. And my idea of a good day out is coming away. I can't believe I just said that. My idea of a good day out is coming away from a historic house and feeling like I've learned those three things, if that makes sense. You know, like why am I here? What have I learned about this specific place that I'm at? How does that fit into a broader national narrative? And maybe I've learned something else about the globe, and the global history that I didn't know before. And obviously a postcard and a slice of cake in the tea room too would add to that day out. But it's the full package. I think they can tell these really unique stories and spaces that few other places can do.
Yeah, the cake is important. We did put out some of our best tray bakes for historic houses when you came for.
They were good.
Where can people find out more about what they can do in association with that? Because you can become a member of historic houses and get to go to lots of these places for free.
Yeah, absolutely, including Alnwick Castle, I believe. So I've spoken a lot about the kind of lobbying function and what we do for our house members, I guess. But if you're a general member of the public, you can join historic houses. You can not only, like when you do that, not only are you supporting our work and supporting independent heritage, but you also get your lovely little card, which will give you free access to about 300 member properties across the UK. It always changes slightly year on year as to which properties that is, but it's 300 of them and they're brilliant. They're often hidden gems, as Deborah asked earlier, and they're places that maybe you wouldn't necessarily know about otherwise, but they're all fascinating. You can find out more on our website, historichouses.org, which is the best place to get information.
Well, I hope that once this episode is released, we'll be up there with History Hit in the podcast. And we will get a chart-topping cake to celebrate. But until then, Sarah, thank you very much for joining us on the Alnwick Castle podcast.
Thank you for having me.
You can find out more about historic houses, including how to become a member, at historichouses.org.
And if you enjoyed this podcast, please let us know. You can leave reviews or ratings on your podcast platform, share it with your friends, or head into our podcast archive to find all our previous episodes.
We'll be back in 2 weeks with the next episode, and until then, I've been Deborah.
And I've been Daniel.
Thank you very much for listening, and goodbye.
Bye.